Welcome to the Soulful Mystics podcast. I'm Steph.
And I'm Julie, and we are intuitive hypnotists, sharing our journey along the way.
Hey Mystics, today's episode is a little bit creepy, and with October just around the corner, we are now getting ready for our October special episode, and we need your stories. So if you've ever had a chilling ghost encounter or a spiritual awakening that left you in awe, or maybe there's some eerie family folklore that's been passed down for generations, we want to hear it all. Send us your ghost stories, metaphysical encounters, or any otherworldly experiences. Whether it's spooky or spiritual, we want to hear it. You can email us at soulfulmysticspodcast@gmail.com or DM us on social media. So this episode will be in 2 parts, maybe more depending on what we find out moving forward. We recorded this episode on September 1st, and already so much has happened since then. In the chat you're about to hear, I did mention moving back to the small town where my ancestors settled, and I mentioned that my family has acquired wounds here that I felt called to help them release. At the time I said that, I had no idea what kind of wounds or how intense life was for them here. On September 5th, I had a chakra reading with Jennifer W., where she saw an entity attached to my back. She really helped me understand where my low energy and depressive feelings were stemming from, and she gave me really great insight into how to move that energy and start removing that entity. That evening, my partner and I had a really intense, deep conversation, and so much weight was removed from both of our hearts. And I felt like that was the first step in removing that entity. And the next morning, on September 6th, I did an energetic detachment ceremony, and I called in my ancestors. I specifically asked for any ancestors that can help me remove those energetic attachments and the entity, so that I can fully connect to my land and allow it to bring more joy into my life. As I was doing the ceremony, I immediately felt better and better. I also felt the ancestors that I have worked with in the past and new ones. I felt a new presence with me. So there was bright, loving energy, as well as some dense, damp energy. I didn't know what that meant or who was showing me that energy. I just noticed it and wrote it down. A couple hours later, I got an email from my mom. Her uncle found a book at a university that specifically described our German lineage with photos and timelines. So much information that I've never heard before. And as I was editing this chat for today, the connections are unreal. Saying my ancestors acquired wounds here is an understatement, and that fact that I felt called to help them find light and heal those wounds has so much more meaning than I originally thought. And I will explain more about this entity and the family history that I discovered in the next episode. So just a trigger warning for this episode. Julie does describe a past life regression that she facilitated for me that I had no recollection of. It did turn into an entity removal and a past life memory that was connected to that entity, and it's not really pleasant to listen to. Okay, without further ado, here is episode 56. I will pull from the Sacred Medicine Oracle, I think.
Okay.
I'm going to ask for insight into today's topic. Medicine rights and accomplishment. I think she's at a body of water.
Oh, interesting.
So today, when we got home, she got out of her crate, and her crate was soaking wet all around. How did she get water here? I can't figure it out. And where the locks are,
Yeah.
were soaking wet.
What? Do you have cameras? Did you go back and look and see?
So I do have cameras, but it wasn't facing where she was. So all I saw was her running out and waiting for us at the window. So when we pulled into the driveway, we just see her and Binks in the window. And I was like, how?
What the heck? Interesting. Water is coming up a lot, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit today too.
Exactly. And so when that happened today, it just kind of like blew my mind a little bit more, because then I was wondering, was something here? I don't know. And then the second card I pulled is Soil and Stars, and to find balance. And so while shuffling these cards, I was asking for insight into how to move forward with all of this stuff that's been happening. When I first moved in, I had these episodes of sleep paralysis, and I felt like there was something kind of looming over me, and I couldn't wake up and I couldn't move. And it happened maybe like 4 times within that week. So I did a cleansing. I think that might be when I reached out to you. I don't really remember when I reached out out to you, but I think it was. So,
Yeah, so we actually did your session. It was June 12th.
and was it because of the sleep paralysis that we were looking into? I don't remember.
So I don't think that was necessarily your intention, because what I have written down as your intention for this session was to gain insight into the sense of unworthiness in order to release it and move forward on your path. So that was your intention, but it ended up becoming an entity removal. And I think it surprised the both of us. And what's interesting about this, I think you talked about it before, where you tried to open the file. So like I sent you the recording and notes, just like we always do. And you tried to open it and your computer like shut down. Like you were in a panic, were worried about like losing everything on your computer, all of that. And leading up to that, I think I hesitated sending it to you. I didn't send it right away. I just had this feeling you weren't meant to listen to this session, which is strange because we always encourage people to listen, because I think a lot of times you can pick up on things you forgot that happened during a session, or maybe it makes better sense to you a few months down the road, or whatever the case may be. But this time was different. I just had this sense that you were not meant to re-listen to it. And you have like memory gaps about this. You don't remember, right?
I still have no idea what happened. And not only did my computer shut down, but it wouldn't turn back on. It was plugged in, it was fully charged. There was no reason for that to happen. And finally got it up and running again, and that file was just gone. So, I mean, I took that as a sign, and I didn't listen to it, and I still have no recollection.
Yeah. And so this is a series of events that's been happening. And I feel like yesterday you finally made a connection on what this could be. So when you moved in, you were having these sleep paralysis. I remember you telling me about that, but that was about it. I don't recall you having any other kind of experience. I mean, you moved in April, right? It was the end of April.
Yeah.
So
And
we did this session about 6 weeks later.
yeah, and I had gotten my new AC brand new installed in June, and it was leaking. It was leaking so much that it flooded my living room. Yeah, and so when I saw a wave surrounded in water, I checked the AC because I was like, did this freaking happen again?
Yeah.
And it didn't. It was really just around her area. So it reminded me of that time where that happened. And I'm telling you, there was so much water. It was just dripping down like a faucet on full blast. And I went under it at one point and I turned it off. And when you turn it off, the opening goes down and it dumped so much freezing cold water on me. And this was during a heat wave. My hair was soaked. I was drenched. And then my dishwasher, I don't know what happened, but it started flooding. And this was all in the exact same time. So there was a lot of water happening in my house that I remember asking, what is this representation of water having to do with this time in my life? And I didn't connect that until yesterday.
I feel like this is hard to talk about because everything leading up to this, it's been hard to recall, hard to talk about. Your computer shut down when you tried to listen to it. So something is definitely going on. So we met Friday morning and we ended up having like a 3-hour chat and it was amazing. But you said to me, what did you say to me? You're like, oh, by the way.
Yeah,
like,
just randomly.
Why the hell wasn't it the first thing you told me? So what did you tell me, Steph? Oh, by the way.
Yeah, so okay, so I live in an A-frame home. My bedroom is on the top floor and it's a half. So like I have really high ceilings in the living room and then I have the bedroom that's like in the other half of that level. So when I'm coming down the stairs, I can easily see my entire living room and my fireplace and the windows outside. So as I was walking down, I saw this figure. He was like a dark gray shadow, like a charcoal shadow, a different texture than, a regular shadow. So in my mind, I was like, okay, this is something, but I convinced myself that it wasn't. It was just a trick of the light because I was still half asleep. And he was like 9 feet tall because he was above my curtains, but I could see very clearly that his feet were on the ground and his head was up beyond the curtain pole. So then I tried to convince myself, I guess it was just a trick of the light. I felt a heaviness. It felt like someone was looking at me, but then I was telling myself, you're just paranoid because you think you saw a 9 foot tall shadow thing in your living room. And then when you and I talked, I kind of pushed it to the back of my mind, but then I don't know what we were talking about that it brought it up.
Yeah, and you described it to me as a 9 foot tall gray being. being.
Mhm.
And you were like, "Oh, but I just chalked it up to like a trick of the light or something."
Yeah.
So that was Friday.
Mhm.
And then Saturday, you went to get your hair done.
This town is a very historical town in Canada, and it is where my ancestors immigrated from Germany here. And I didn't know that before I moved here, but it is such a small town, and everybody who grew up here stayed here. So when I was talking to my hairdresser, she knows everything about everyone. And when I told her that my family immigrated here to High Falls, she's like, "Oh my God, what's their name, their last name?" When I told her, of course, she knows all about what happened here historically. But because in that time, my family moving from Germany to here, the French population at the time was not very accepting of them. So my family has some wounds here that I felt I was called here to help heal. So that was one thing that I started explaining to her, and we started talking about spirituality. And she told me when she was a little girl here, she had the sleep paralysis when she was younger, and there would be these really tall beings, but she described as a man, a shadow man, that would touch her leg, and she couldn't move, and it happened to her very often. So in her dream world, she was experiencing this. So I told her about my experience that I saw this 9 foot tall man, and she said, "You have to be very careful with this." And I was like, "Oh, well, I cleansed my house and we do entity removals and all that stuff." And she said that because these are not beings of light and they don't come from here and this dimension, that it might deter them, but it doesn't make them go away. And their motive is basically to feed off of energy. And when you are a being of light and you practice all this magical stuff, you're kind of a lighthouse to them. And so they come to feed off your energy. But she told me that this area being so filled and surrounded by lakes, that these beings historically, from what she learned from her ancestors, is that they are actually lake entities. And so they get energy from water. They are water beings, but mostly from lakes, the dense, darker energy. Anyway, so she said that once they start coming to you, they can touch you and you can feel it mostly when you're in a dream state, and that they would hide rather than leave.
So I personally have never heard of like a lake entity. Like this is a new concept to me and I'm very intrigued. So I'm curious if anyone else has heard of anything like this. I have heard of like the shadow man with the hat. So if they're one and the same or if these are two different things, that I don't know. What I do know is that when I facilitated this session for you back in June, this past life regression that turned into an entity removal, but it also was a past life memory too.
Oh,
So I do see some similarities to what your hairstylist was saying and like what you've described in your sleep paralysis. So I'm happy to read the notes, but I want to make sure that I have your full permission to do so because it's not pleasant.
before meeting with you, I called upon all of my guides and I
Yes.
asked them to guide us into what's meant to be shared with me and what's not. And I trust that you'll be muted somehow if it's
Yeah.
something that I'm not meant to hear. But I
Okay.
also lit my sage and I protected my house and my space. So I'm feeling good about it. I feel at this point, now that I've heard what she said and that this location is just like a hotspot, the more information I have, I feel like it's going to empower me to
Okay.
learn how to protect myself.
I did the same thing. I've called in the troops, so to
The
say.
troops.
My spiritual troops,
Yeah.
my protectors. Yes. Okay. I'm going to read these notes. And like you said, spirit, mute me if
Yeah.
something is not meant to be said. There's a lot.
Really. I didn't even remember that there was a past life portion to it. I
Yeah.
couldn't even tell you one single thing. I didn't even remember the intention.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that that was my intention.
And maybe this entity or whatever it is what was making you feel that
Hmm.
sense of unworthiness, but it just seems like there's more to it. Okay. And these are the notes as I took them. So sometimes, when you take notes, they're in short form and they're not full sentences. So if it feels a little broken up, that's why. So for the first scene, you were inside. You said, "I'm here in my room. There's someone next to me. Don't know who they are. It's a shadow of some kind. He came to you recently in a dream where you had sleep paralysis. You don't know why they are there." And I said, "Can you ask them?" And you replied, "The only answer that you're getting is fear." causing it or feeding off of it, and you said you're not sure. So you were feeling kind of out of sorts. You feel like you didn't have control. It wasn't fear. That your eyes were leaking. You weren't sure if you could wipe them if you wanted to, meaning that you just felt like you couldn't move. So I reassured you that you had the power to go ahead and move and wipe your eyes if you wanted to. And you started hearing crackles throughout your house. It felt like resistance of some kind. And I said, is it an entity? And you said you're blocking it out. So then it said, you said, it feels like there is a hand on your left ankle.
Okay. So,
Yes.
like, the goosebumps hurt my legs right now.
Yeah.
So I felt that in the moment, like it was happening at that time.
You felt it as it was happening in your hypnosis. The entity that was next to you, it felt like the hand was around your ankle, like in real time while we were doing the
Oh my
hypnosis.
God.
Yeah.
I literally have goosebumps everywhere because she told me that that what she's experienced is that they touched her leg.
Yeah. So you said when you feel that, they are sending a memory of a cave of some kind. Living in this deep, dark cave, it's damp and weird. It feels sacrificial. It's welcoming something in, and that's when it began. Don't
Okay.
know if it's a person or if that's what you welcomed in. It feels like there are three of you. You feel a firm grasp on your ankle. So we basically go into exploring that memory. And this is where it gets a little hard to hear. So I'm just going to put it out there to use your discernment for people listening. If it feels like you want to hear more, then do so. But if not, then it's totally okay to just wait for the next episode. So, all right, we explored the memory. You said you were 11 years old, you were female. Back in time, you were wearing decent clothes, but you didn't feel attached to many people at that age. Your younger brother is with you, he's 8. You're going to explore the woods. You sense something is watching. They would leave handmade dolls and toys that interested you, but you felt it was unusual. These toys would get closer and closer to this cave as if it was beckoning you. I have chills. The resistance to go in because you feel like it's a trap, but you had no evidence to base it off of, no one to talk to, no open communication. So then you see a man inside the cave, but it's just a shadow. You understood who left the gifts. You went back home and you were curious. So it feels like 20 days of this went on before you enter to understand or speak to him. And you can't see his face. You're not sure if it's a man or a being. You send your brother to go look for more toys and you approach the cave. So I remember that you were like, okay, I don't want my brother near this, but I want to go check it out, is kind of what that was like. You describe seeing his outline. You see a glow deeper in the cave like a fire. He said it possessed magic and you can go see what it is. And then you said, this is not part of the memory, but you said your house is really crackling right now.
Yeah,
So
that's creepy. I don't remember any of that.
it gets worse. Do you want me to continue?
Yeah, now I'm intrigued.
Sorry. Okay. So the crackling entices you to go see, and you did. You felt magic. He didn't do anything. You left and you were okay. You went home. All you could think about was going back. You left your brother at home one day and you went back to this man. You would experience the magic. You can't feel it now, I had in parentheses, but it felt like something you didn't know before, relating to like seeing it on TV for the first time. You were looking into something so beautiful and so different. You want to keep coming back, but he is keeping his distance. So he seems to be far back in the corner. So it's like this pattern of where you keep going home and you keep coming back. He tells you that you have to share your brother and you feel like it is right. You're not seeing anything bad. You're not feeling anything bad. It feels right. So the next day, you bring your brother, and your brother's excited to go. You felt that there was a lot of heaviness at home, so it just felt like it was the right thing to do. So the man brings you deeper into the cave. You've never gone in this far yet, going closer and closer to the glow. It feels like there's no oxygen in there. It's hard to breathe, but the man seems fine. So you say that you don't know if he's actually alive or not. And then you say he sacrifices your brother and you are next. He needed you to see it in order for that fear and sense of guilt to feed it. You have to have the sense of suffering along with it. It can't just be a human sacrifice. It has to be because someone loves the person and has to experience the heartbreak. There's a lot of other energy in this area at this time, and it feels dense and like there is a lot more. So then you run, and when you ran, it felt like someone wrapped a rope around your ankle. You fell and hit your head. It feels like you're alive, but you're not able to move. And I think this is a lot of the paralysis stuff. So you don't know if it's from the injury or if you were knocked out. You're in a completely different place and position. Your vision is blurry. You're unable to speak or open your eyes, but you see that shadow and you can't make out the details. So you don't know if you're deeper in the cave. It feels dark and dingy in a different spot. The glow is no longer there. So you still have something around your ankle. You feel like you are drawing off the energy. It feels dense. You don't really know what happened to your brother. It almost feels like a game. The next thing is that your brother was put on top of a rock. Do you want me to say this part?
Yeah, I mean, I think
Okay.
so.
It's okay. So your brother was put on top of a rock, but it was carved like a bathtub. It was shallow. There was a slide all around, and you saw his blood going around the rock formation. It was leading to a symbol carved into the ground, but you didn't stay long enough to see it. So obviously the goal was to fill it up somehow. There is a sense that a part of you is still there. There is something being given, a power source, a plug like you plug your phone into. It's what it's taking from you. You are giving this energy without your permission. It's not important to understand the purpose. It's within you, but you don't know how to express it. And then around this time, we called in your spirit team to surround you and pull the plug. And you said the weight is being lifted. You feel your ankle is starting to go back to normal. And then you said each crack in the cave lets in the light. So it feels like something is shining through the cracks as these enlightened beings are surrounding. We asked your guides to move the energy to a light. And then you explained that 3 angels with big fluffy wings, they came and picked him up and they were flying him out. You said the heaviness is completely gone. Your ankle feels free and feels normal. The angels showed you how the energy took over. When you felt loneliness, it brought you back to that time, and it would invite the energy back in. So when you're feeling that loneliness, it kind of takes you back there. And that's how that energy comes in. So they are showing you that talking about it and accepting help is the fight against it. And I have in capital letters, you chose yourself over it. It is done. It is final. You said you've never seen this kind of finality on anything. It's resolved full circle. You understand where it came from. And then it just says to reach out, ask, accept help if you feel the loneliness again. So my question to you is, now that all of this is kind of resurfacing, have you been feeling the loneliness again?
No.
Good.
Whatever happened there, it was complete. Now my curiosity is if this is like a test, because of course, when there's one being of a certain
Yeah.
kind, there's multiple.
Yeah.
And so maybe that was a test to see if I was going to succumb to it. So I'm really happy we actually did this, because now I'm
Good.
just going to imagine that cave and the crackles and letting that light in, because what she did tell me also was that these shadow beings, specifically the ones that she experienced and that I feel I saw here, they don't like light. So that actually makes a lot of sense, that it might have been a similar being, or it could have, if it was a man, it could have been that being that was driving him to do whatever he did. I don't know. But it feels like the caves, the lake, the water, the dingy, the wet and damp. And for me in protection, imagining that light, like envisioning it and calling on those angels again. So I am going to work that into my daily practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the angels, they just came in and they lifted him out. So if you sense or feel, or you're having like strange happenings of water around your space, that is like an instant, okay, angels, survey the property
Yeah.
and remove
Pull.
what, yeah, pluck them out and fly them away.
That's it for today's episode. Until next time, stay curious.
Stay mystical.